It's 8 p.m. Cairo local time and you're now watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. Qnews has stated that intensive preparations are underway in northern Sinai Governorate for the opening of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. According to Qnews, hospitals in Sinai have received hundreds of wounded Palestinians before the Rafah crossing was closed on the Palestinian side. The report also mentioned that Egypt's Minister of Health, Khaled Abdel Ghaffar, is set to visit Sinai hospitals to inspect the health system and operating rooms, which need to be equipped to accommodate the injured Palestinians. A high-level Egyptian source has confirmed that technical meetings are ongoing in Cairo, focusing on the mechanisms for implementing the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. According to the source, the discussions are centered on the logistics of delivering aid into Gaza, with plans to send 600 trucks per day, as outlined in the truce agreement. The technical meetings, which began today, Friday, in Egypt's capital, involved teams from Egypt, Qatar, the United States, and Israel. The goal is to finalize the procedures for the successful implementation of the ceasefire, which has become a critical priority following the recent escalation in Gaza. Gaza's health ministry have confirmed that the Palestinian death toll from the ongoing Israeli aggression on Gaza since October 7th has surged to over 46,800, with more than 110,600 injured. And now we move to a live broadcast of UNRWA Commissioner General speaking in a daily UN briefing.
Knowing what happened and what the context was, I'm more than happy to provide you this information. I can give you just one example in the top of my head, because I keep hearing the same, that one day I went to Beirut, I met a political faction, and I struck a deal to give into their demand, and this featured very high on this report. This is wrong. I went to Beirut to tell them, don't even try to put any pressure on this organization, because if you do so, I will hand over to you the key of this agency. But for advocacy purposes, there is a need to twist, and this is part of a disinformation campaign. When you have billboards and you put a person, you say this is an UNRWA staff member, is only a terrorist, how do you believe our staff after that feel? We had recently a search in a house in Naples. The IDF entered into the house. Search saw that the person works for UNRWA. You're a terrorist. Force the person to give access to all the data of the computer. Keep saying, if you continue to work for a terrorist organization, we'll arrest you for terrorism. And the person has been brought for interrogation for hours. This is the impact of this kind of, I would say, statement, very loose, which in reality put our staff in danger. So if you have more precise question after that, you are welcome to engage with my office.
Very quick follow-up. Beside the public request for a meeting, they issued letters that they sent to you before, private letters that they sent to you before issuing the report. Did you receive them?
They are offered to meet colleagues that they haven't met because they want to be seen with me. I don't want to engage. For what? For which purpose? The purpose is not to address issues. The purpose is to amplify the negative campaign these people have. Because do absolutely no mistake. What is the purpose of that type of organization? To get rid of an agency like UNRWA, because they believe that by getting rid of an organization like UNRWA, you will strip one for all the Palestinians from the refugee status.
By the way, since Mr. Lazzarini pointed out the problems having to do with the safety of UNRWA staff, I wanted to remind you all that the number of UNRWA staff who have been killed since October 2023 is now up to 269. Deji?
Yes, Mr. Lazzarini, Shudachu with China Central Television. Very quick questions. There are multiple reports that the Israeli Foreign Ministry...
That was the UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini, who is giving his report to the UN, or his daily briefing, as he said that they provided vital services to implement the Gaza ceasefire agreement, and that they are playing a pivotal role in the educational field in the Gaza Strip. Additionally, he stated that they demand the prevention of measures hindering international support to the agency and called on the international community to give all the support for the agency in order to be able to fulfill their mission. Back to our bulletin, and Israel's Security Cabinet has ratified a ceasefire deal to exchange dozens of detainees and pause the 15 months war of an essential 6 weeks. The approval came after an unexpected delay, which sparked fears that the last-minute disagreements between Israel and Hamas could scuttle the agreement. Far-right members of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government also threatened to derail months of work to end the conflict. The deal will now go to the full cabinet for the final sign-off so that the agreement can be implemented on Sunday with the release of the first detainees and prisoners. Israelis supporting hard-right politicians have blocked a highway in Jerusalem, denouncing the ceasefire agreement. Around 200 protesters attended a rally near the Israeli parliament and government ministries. Hardliners in Netanyahu's government were still hoping to block the deal, though a majority of ministers were expected to support it. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich's party stated that it would demand a return to fighting at the end of the truce's first phase as a condition for staying in the government. Israel's hardline National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has stated that he will resign from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government if it ratifies the ceasefire deal in Gaza, which he strongly opposes. Israeli media outlets reported earlier that the cabinet was expected to vote to ratify the agreement today, but there has been no confirmation from the Prime Minister's office. This week, Ben-Gvir urged Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich to join him in a last-ditch attempt to prevent the ceasefire deal, which he described as a dangerous compilation to Hamas. Smotrich has called the deal to halt the fighting in Gaza and exchange Israeli detainees for Palestinian prisoners a catastrophe for Israel, but has not threatened to quit the government. For more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers in our newsroom. To you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mana. And so for more analysis on the ceasefire, we are joined from Cairo by the managing editor at Al Ahram, who is Mohammed Az-Al-Din. Thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. So the Israeli Security Cabinet's approved the Gaza ceasefire agreement. What do you make of this?
أعتقد أن هناك
I think that there is the direction towards the finalizing the agreements at the time, and the moderate voices beat the extremist voices in this meeting, especially with the internal pressures applied on the Israeli government, whether from the people, the hostages, relatives, or the regular citizen, plus the external pressure applied by the United States of America and the US President giving a certain time to the conflict parties to end the war and exchange hostages and detainees. I think this pressure resulted in passing the agreement today, and in spite of the opposition applied by Ben Gvir and other ministers, and I think everything is gonna go the way it is planned to implement the agreement on Sunday and starting the release of hostages and detainees. In the first phase of this three-phase agreement, of course, there is an internal conflict taking place in the Israeli government, and the agreement will not be implemented smoothly. There will be continuous attempts by Sumridge and other right-wing officials to try and obstacle this agreement, or at least achieve political gains that would empower them to run for the next elections, especially that the Israeli coalition after the Ben Gvir resignation today is not stable. He did not recommend or mobilize for anti-government efforts. He is keen on being in the political picture in the upcoming period, especially in the three-phase agreement.
Well, you mentioned these major disagreements within the Israeli government concerning the ceasefire agreement. How might they resolve themselves, these major disagreements?
There will be a political agreement. Netanyahu is not willing to oppose everyone, so there will be an agreement. According to the Israeli media, there has already been an agreement between the Israeli factions that the deal will, or the three phases of the deal will not be implemented if Hamas refrained from releasing the hostages. The Israeli forces will go back to shelling the Gaza Strip, and I think this internal agreement between the government factions and the coalition forming the government would be a point to overcome the pressure being applied by the right-wing officials on the Israeli government, so that there's an agreement that the government is working for the release of the hostages, and it's also keen on the Israeli national security. And it's also a consensus between the different factions in Israel that there is no future for Netanyahu during the upcoming period, and therefore he is not making enemies of the most important senior officials in the right wing, whether the military generals or the technocratic right-wing officials like Sumridge and Ben Gvir.
And of course, Israel hasn't stopped attacking Gaza since the announcement of the ceasefire. Do you expect that Israel will up the attacks, escalate the attacks on Gaza in the coming hours?
Of course, unfortunately, this is highly expected from the Israeli forces, especially the extremist factions who are carrying out the plans of the military generals, whether in the south or north of Gaza. And we expect the continuing shelling of innocent civilians during the next few hours till the date of the implementation of the ceasefire on Sunday. Yes, I expect it to continue.
Well, thank you very much. That was the managing editor of Al Ahram, joining us from Cairo, Mohammed Az Al-Din. Thank you very much for joining us here on Q News, and we'll go back to you, Mona.
Right, thank you so much, Mark, for the analysis. And back to our bulletin, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has expressed confidence that the Gaza ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas will begin as expected on Sunday, January 19th, despite a last-minute glitch. Blinken, in his final news conference, has, as the U.S. top diplomat, said he had been speaking with U.S. negotiator Brett McCurk and Qatari officials to resolve the issue. International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan has defended his decision to bring war crimes allegations against Israel's prime minister, saying Israel has made no real effort to investigate the allegations itself. The ICC judges issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Israeli Defense Chief Yoav Gallant, and Hamas leader Ibrahim al-Masri last November on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Gaza conflict. Israel has rejected the jurisdiction of the Hague-based court and denies the allegations of war crimes. The United States, Israel's main ally, is also not a member of the ICC and has criticized the arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. The World Health Organization has called for the international community to step up and fund a scaled-up aid response in Gaza after Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire deal. The UN Health Agency said its member states, donors, and global community, including the private sector, should support both the urgent health needs and the longer-term rebuilding of Gaza's healthcare system. Peppercorn said WHO was ready to deliver, although the significant security and political obstacles to delivering aid across Gaza need to be removed. Speaking at the same briefing, the WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom, the WHO is seeking $1.5 billion to help more than 300 million people living in 42 emergency zones. Palestinians have shopped at a marketplace in Qnews in Gaza as Israel cabinet is set to approve the ceasefire deal with Hamas. The ceasefire accord emerged on Wednesday after mediation by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. The deal outlines a 6-week initial ceasefire with the gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces. Palestinians living in a Nusayrat camp in Gaza have welcomed the ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel with mixed feelings. A displaced resident from Gaza City expressed a deep longing to reunite with his father, who has stayed in Gaza City since the outbreak of the war, while the rest of the family was forced to flee to central Gaza. A complex ceasefire agreement was reached on Wednesday, January 15th, following mediation efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. Satellite imagery has shown how 15 months of warfare have left the Gaza Strip in ruins. Imagery from before and during the fighting, as well as from the day the ceasefire deal was announced, showed swaths of cities of Gaza, Khan Yunis and Rafah razed to the ground. The satellite imagery revealed the extent of the rebuilding work that awaits Gaza as Palestinians hope for an end to the fighting. In Lebanon, French President Emmanuel Macron has called on Israel to accelerate its troop withdrawal from southern Lebanon. Macron met Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam and United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres during an official visit in Beirut. Speaking during a press conference, he also said Lebanon's military must have a total monopoly on weapons, and he voiced France's support for strengthening the Lebanese army's deployment in the south. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged an end to Israel's continued occupation and military operations in South Lebanon. He told members of the UN peacekeeping force as he visited them the continued occupation by the Israeli occupation military inside the UNIFIL area operations and the conduct of military operations in Lebanese territory are violations of Resolution 1701. In a press conference, France's Macron has highlighted the dire conditions faced by those displaced by Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, stressing the urgent need for support. He also announced that Air France will soon resume flights to Lebanon as part of efforts to strengthen ties and assist the country during this crisis. Additionally, Macron called for transparency regarding the victims of the Beirut port explosion in 2020, underscoring the importance of justice for those affected. Lebanon's Prime Minister-designate Nawaf Salam has announced that he has a preliminary vision for the government which he intends to present to President Joseph Aoun, emphasizing that the government formation process will not be delayed. Salam's remarks came during a press conference following his meeting with Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri at the Ain Attenah headquarters in western Beirut. He added that parliamentary consultations were not concluded on Thursday, noting that there is a consensus among the blocs on the urgency of work towards the country's recovery. And in Syria, International Criminal Court prosecutor ICC Karim Khan has arrived in Damascus and met with Syria's de facto leader Ahmed al-Shara at the People's Palace. Karim Khan held discussions with Syrian authorities on how the War Crimes Tribunal could help in their efforts to prosecute crimes allegedly committed in the country. As for the economy, oil prices moved lower on Friday but remained on course for a fourth consecutive week of gains as the latest U.S. sanctions on Russian energy trade heightened expectations for oil supply disruptions. Brent crude futures were down 0.70% at $80.72 per barrel, having gained 1.15% this week. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were down 0.56% at $78.24 a barrel, having climbed 2.13% for the week. Gold prices were pressured by an uptick in the US dollar on Friday, but remained on track for a weekly gain as uncertainties around President-elect Donald Trump's policies and renewed bets of further rate cuts lifted bullion above the key $2,700 level. Spot gold eased 0.1% to $2,712.30 per ounce, while U.S. gold futures slid 0.1% to $2,747.40. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. Intensive preparations are underway in North Sinai Governorate for the opening of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. French President Emmanuel Macron calls on Israel to accelerate its troops' withdrawal from southern Lebanon. And ICC's Karim Khan meets Syria's de facto leader Ahmed al-Shara at the People's Palace. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.